Hey guys, how's it going? I see that Bradley's first in the house, followed by LDG, Bird, oh, Pray 5, my good friend Moxley, Captain Fandom Nerd. Let's see, we got Yucksters in the house and Stan Lee. Good to see you all, and anybody else that joins in or has joined in but didn't put anything in the chat. So, so first of all, I want to respond to something that LDG did put in the chat, and he's asking if this is the Cation argument. And for those of you that weren't here a week ago Friday, we had a really intense and long and drawn out argument over the existence of God. And not specifically LD, although, that is part of the reason I'm doing this, is because, it's something that I think is worth examining every now and then, as far as, no sane Christian doesn't at some point in their life look in the mirror and say, am I crazy, for believing all this? Is this really how reality is? Or, what's going on? And so we do need to self-examine. We do need to self-criticize, and we do need to look at and make sure that what we are believing is true. If we don't do that, then we're practicing something called blind faith, and blind faith can be very dangerous. And we've seen it many times throughout history, where people will try to get people to put blind faith in whether it be in a God, whether it be in a country, whether it be in a political ideology, and that can lead to atrocity. And unfortunately, we have seen that time and time again. And so blind faith, I would argue, is an extremely dangerous animal. And so in order to check ourselves, that means we do have to question ourselves. So that's I want to make sure that I'm clear on that. Now, obviously, I don't believe that faith is a delusion, but I want to make sure that I'm clear both to you and to myself as to why faith isn't a delusion. And in order to do that, we have to understand what is a delusion and what is faith, and are they somehow equated to each other? So the problem is that we tend to distort the meanings of words sometimes, especially when we're translating old texts into modern language. And then maybe the meaning of the modern term might have changed, but we forget that that doesn't mean that the meaning of the old text has changed. It simply means that our use of that term has changed. So a lot of the times when we look at words like faith, we have to understand what it means from a biblical perspective, not necessarily what I define it as or what you define it as. We have to understand that that word has a meaning that had a meaning 2,000 years ago and still has the same meaning today, even though it's expressed through the term faith. And so what is biblical faith? Well, simply put, biblical faith is trust. It's trust. It's not belief in God. And in fact, the Bible even makes this very clear, is that, the demons in hell believe in God. And so, and the Bible also talks about it's faith. We're saved by the grace of God through the expression of our faith. So how could simply belief, be the key to salvation? Because, like I said, you can believe and not, very clearly not be saved, especially, if the demons are not saved. So faith simply means to trust God. It simply means to understand that while we may not always get and why God does X, Y, or Z, we may not always understand why God tells me to do X, Y, or Z. It's a matter of trust that God has our best interests in mind. And if we, if we can hold on to that level of trust, That is what we refer to as a saving faith. But the expression of that faith is through what's called good works. Right. So, and that's one thing that a lot of Christians, particularly evangelical Christians, argue about is salvation based on works. You're not saved by your work, but you are not saved from your work, is something my pastor likes to say. And the idea is that if you believe and you trust, then you must work. So if you actually believe for a minute that God exists and that Christ died on the cross and all that, and you trust that this plan he has of salvation is a good one, and that you have faith in God, then the next step is to do that which God wants us to do. And how do you find out what God wants you to do? Well, it's very simple. We have a wonderful book that explains much of that in very plain terms. So that's faith in a nutshell. So what is delusion? And that's another word that unfortunately we sometimes, well, quite frankly, a lot of time we use incorrectly. Delusion to many simply means believing in something for which there is no evidence. That is not the case. You can believe in something, like, for example, you can believe there are UFOs. You can believe that Bigfoot is real. You can believe in all sorts of stuff without evidence, and that doesn't make you delusional. What you can't, what a delusion is to believe something despite evidence to the contrary. So if, I want to say that the sky is red, even though I'm looking at the sky and it's clearly blue, that is a delusion. And so delusion is holding on to a false truth, despite the fact that you have direct evidence that, is contrary to that belief. So then I would simply ask anybody, any reasonable person, and it doesn't matter if you're a Christian, an atheist, or some other religious belief, is trusting God a delusion? I would dare say no. You could argue that it's, that God doesn't exist and you don't think there's enough evidence, blah blah blah. But that doesn't mean that believing that God does exist and trusting that God has a plan for you is a delusion. So I hope that makes sense to anybody that might have questioned that. And I wanted to make that clear because I think that a lot of people do get that messed up. And then that gives you guys time to put stuff in the chat if you have any questions or whatever today. So Bird of Prey 5 says, life is a dream. Well, whose dream is it then? And then there's Captain Phantom Nerd. Good to see you. LDG saying hi to everybody. Moxley saying hi. How are you say? Yuckster is in the house. Good to see you. Not sure what Stanley is saying. Old Eminem. Maybe you could clarify that. Julesie's in the house. Says good afternoon. How you doing? Was that the 8-hour 5 a.m. stream? Yes, the one it was a crazy stream. But yeah, Alex has arrived. Good to see you. And Stanley says nothing wrong with some harmless self-delusion. I respectfully disagree. And because I think that we need to be careful, and not just in our walk with God, but in anything. If we know something is false, so we need to accept it as false. If we know something is true, we need to accept that it is true. Good band though. Not sure again what you mean. Love those guys. Alex says cult leaders and their inner circles are experts at gaslighting potential conscripts. Yeah, not sure. Do you have a point to that, Alex? I mean, and in fact, I've been watching a very interesting set of documentaries on HBO with the wife about that cult that Allison Mack was involved with. So, but not sure what your point is. Um, and Yuckster says, I will see my dream come true, come alive at last. I will touch the sky and they're not going to hold me down. No more, no more. They're not going to change my mind. No, they're not going to hold me. Okay. Yuckster that says, I believe Jane Roddenberry was a genius. So you see, that's a delusion. CD says, hope you're doing well. I am doing okay, my friend. The medication attempts to keep the pain at bay to varying degrees of success. Right now, I'm not feeling all that bad, but we'll see how we're doing this afternoon. The intro video had an old guy wearing an EM cat looked a bit like old Eminem, the blind faith with. Oh, okay, gotcha. Excuse me. EM in at a. By the way, so that intro video, just so you guys are aware, that video is made by our church. That's actually they play that before services. And Corey, our pastor, said, I could use any of the church music and stuff for my live streams because he loves what we do here. And EM is actually for experience music. That's something that we have that branded on a lot of T-shirts and stuff like that for people that like the music at our church. But everybody you saw in that intro video was part of our church. In fact, if you look very carefully, you can spot me in one of those clips. I'm not going to tell you where, but the everything we do as far as audio, video in our church is done in-house. But yeah. And Alex says it was related to your big talk about delusion. Well, what I'm curious, though, do you have a point about it? That's all. I mean, if you're trying to say, are you trying to suggest that Christianity is a cult, or are you trying to just mention that cult leaders are good at getting people to believe a delusion, which they are. They are incredibly good at it. So yes. And Stanley says, what's with the Lily delivery? What? Huh? What? I don't even know what you mean there, Stan. No idea. Maybe help me out there. Oh, you're talking about in the video. I'm sorry. I was like on a totally different wavelength there. I think the idea of that video, if you look at it, is neighbors being kind to neighbors, and so the little kids start bringing the lilies over to the lady to build a relationship, and then eventually the lady invites them in, and they all become neighbors to each other, not just physically, but with the attitude of neighbors, caring about each other. So, but, part of, what God's love is to love people no matter what. And that means loving people we disagree with, or loving people we may be afraid of or not like, or whatever. And, kids are good at this. Adults were not so much. So, yeah. And Alex says, cult brainwashing and gaslighting is a weaponized delusion making. Oh, absolutely. And it's amazing how good they can be at it, because we as humans can be very susceptible to that kind of thing. And, watching some of these people that got out of the cult and some of the people that were still in it during this documentary. In fact, one of the members of the cult, for those of you that don't know about the Allison Mack sex cult thing, one of the members of the cult was also a cast member on Battlestar Galactica. They were targeting actors specifically. But they have this ability, not because they have any kind of supernatural power. Although you look at the guy that's the cult leader of this group, and you're like, how the heck is he getting dozens, if not hundreds, of women to be willing to submit to his every sexual desire? Including people that we assume are reasonable, intelligent people like Allison Mack and the girl from Battlestar Galactica. They're not all just a bunch of bimbos walking around. And so how does, and this guy looks like a freaking toad, right? And when you listen to him talk, it's just a bunch of philosophical gobbledygook, and I mean, like, it's really stupid stuff. Like, he'll just be there and like, "And dreams are the fabric of the real," and stupid stuff like, and they're just like, "Oh, he's just so brilliant." Um, and I think that, and I'm sorry for my non-believing friends here, but who might take offense to this a little bit. But I think that we are more susceptible to that if we don't have a grounding in the spiritual matters, and because we are as humans, we are instinctively wired to seek the divine. I truly believe that. Um, and the Bible even says as much, but it's not just because the Bible says it. I do think that it's true, and I think that the existence of cults, and not just at the level of small, sex cults or religious cults, but also when we look at the way people are about political ideology, where they almost worship political candidates. And I mean, I saw this ad, because we just had the midterm elections here in the United States. I saw an ad for DeSantis in Florida, and I could not believe that they had the gall to put this ad out there, and yet, he won by a very significant margin. And the ad literally says that God created DeSantis to basically save people, blah blah blah, and what a great gift from God DeSantis is, and all this. And I was just like absolutely dumbfounded that a political ad like that could actually run, and that people who had any kind of association with any kind of church would say anything other than that this guy's a blasphemer. But there he is in office, because we have this tendency to, we don't want to necessarily look at the rules and regulations of the Bible and follow those. Instead, it's much better to find a person to latch onto, and it's easy to do. But the stronger we are in our faith, then the less likely we are to fall for something like that. Youngster says, dealing with dating market nowadays, most women are delusional compared to a 10 or 15 or 20 years ago. I don't believe that. I don't think that people are, it's funny. We have this tendency, since you mentioned it, and hey, Andy, good to see you. We have this tendency to belittle people. Either we say people are dumber today than they were a few years ago, but then we also say that people were dumb 100 years ago, 1,000 years ago, whatever. And I think that's well. I think there are smart people and there are dumb people in every generation. And so I think we need to be careful about wide-reaching statements like that, because I honestly, are there women that seem delusional today? Yes, but you know what? 20 years ago, there were too. Stanley, yeah, I get scared looking at those political gatherings. Absolutely. Terrifying to me. And I don't care which political party you are. When you look at the way people are at these political rallies, my gosh, it really is like it's a cult. And it absolutely frightens me. So there's Indy. Good to see you. And Alex says we're talking about cults. Well, not specifically, but yeah, that's been a topic here so far. Only women care about a man's bank account, and that's the only thing women care about, and it's how much money in your bank account, especially if you're in the dating scene. Well, but let me tell you something. That has been that if you had a big old trust fund, you had no problem finding women today. You had no trouble finding women 10 years ago. You had no trouble finding women 50 years ago. You had no trouble finding women 100 years ago. And in fact, several hundred years ago, if you had a lot of money, that meant you got all the women, right? So no, it's definitely not a modern new thing. And part of that is because, if you look at the human animal, uh, then men are kind of designed, built, and wired to be the provider of the family, where women are more or less the caretaker of the family. And I know that's sexist to suggest that men and women aren't exactly the same, but oh well, I guess I'm just a sexist. And the but because of that, when men look at women, they're subconsciously looking for women that would be good caretakers. And that's one of the reasons that men want women that basically fawn over them, that want, because that's a sign that they want to take care of them. Where women are looking for men who are good providers. And in the modern context, that's a big bank account. That's just facts, man. And let's see. Indy saying hi to Alex. Stanley said, not just love of their party, but the hate of the opposing party. Oh, yeah. It's an us versus them mentality at a level that we haven't seen. I mean, it's just growing and growing and growing because in the United States, the two major political parties have obviously always opposed each other at one level or another. But that opposition has just turned into unbridled hatred over the last 20, 25 years. And it's absolutely scary to me. It's terrifying when I look at people on both sides of the political aisle that act like their candidate is good and the opposing candidate is evil, and you have people just cheering and chanting and suggesting that that's like, sickening. What would you say is the most evil cult in recorded history? That's a tough one because, I mean, first of all, the vast majority of cults none of us would know about because there have been so many. I mean, you can obviously look at groups like the Manson family and as low hanging fruit. You could look at uh, groups like the Westboro Baptist Church and the damage that they've done to the Christian church as a whole, and they would definitely be a good candidate. But I don't know that it's so easy to just say this is the most evil cult in history. I think that cult mentality is inherently dangerous. So whether it's a quote unquote good cult or bad cult, if you're in a cult, you should get out. Hot chicks dated rich guys since forever. That is 100% true. And then Alex putting in the lyrics to Gold Digger. Yeah, see, there's even songs about it. David Koresh says Stan Lee. Yeah, the Branch Davidians, I think they were called. They were definitely, I don't know if they were the most evil, but they were certainly one of the most destructive to the people in it. And so, that's as far as, yes. As far as most evil, I would say, you know what, they're all evil, and it doesn't, I'm not grading on a curve. Alex says the People's Temple. Let's see. The David Koresh has seemed most violent I can remember, tanks and everything. Well, the tanks were not from David Koresh. That was from the United States government. So, but the Branch Davidian compound incident was horrific, especially if you saw it live on TV. It was like, oh my gosh. Yoxter says, I think the best thing for this country is peaceful divorce. All the states go their own way because the political state in this country nowadays, we might as well go to a second civil war. Well, the funny thing is, and is that the way this country is supposed to run, you're not that far off. Spring. The way that it's supposed to go is that, I mean, the United States of America, the 50 United States, are supposed to be run like they're each 50 little countries. Think about the European Union, right? And what holds the United States together is what we refer to as the federal government. But the federal government's job was to provide the common defense for all 50 states, to maintain and regulate interstate commerce, those kinds of things. So that as a collection or coalition of states, the 50 would be stronger than any one individually. Unfortunately, those lines have been blurred very much over the last 200 years. And so now people don't think of there being any real difference between different states. And that's why people in California will get upset because people in Texas see things a little differently. When in actuality, it shouldn't matter. And the federal government shouldn't be trying to lean hard to the left or hard to the right. Their job is to provide the common defense and maintain interstate commerce. But unfortunately, it is what it is. Stanley says, yeah, but the government has to use as much force to deal with any other cults. And yeah, I remember watching the SWAT guys raiding the Koresh compound. It was crazy. Yeah. I don't know that because a lot of cults, like, I mean, look at, oh gosh, what were they? Jonestown. A lot of people died in Jonestown, and the government didn't have to raid them. You know, people literally drank the Kool-Aid there. And that's where the term drinking the Kool-Aid comes from. And land bat on the prowl. Yes, indeed. The land bat is feeling aggressive today. The most evil cults of National Socialist Party of Germany in World War II. You know, interestingly enough, that's actually an apt description of that party, because they really had a lot of cult-like traits. And so, because a cult is usually centered around worshiping an individual, a charismatic leader of some kind, who typically, and a lot, you know, because we think of cults as a religious thing only, because it's very typical that the person in charge will claim some special link to God, or sometimes to actually be God. Like I know a lot of people believe that David Koresh was like a reincarnation of Jesus or something. And but it doesn't have to be centered around religion. And Uncle Adolf is a wonderful example of that. Youngster is that he was a charismatic leader that actually was almost he was an anti religious figure, where he basically looked at the people of Germany and said that their common problem was the Jews. And so, and he convinced people that was true. That's one of the reasons that I get so worried about any time a politician starts pointing the finger at any group and suggesting that that group is a major cause of all our problems. Because while we think, oh, that, what happened in Germany could never happen in the modern day, I strongly disagree. So I think that it absolutely can, and we have to guard ourselves against the us versus them mentality. That's what it boils down to. Landbat is lovesick. She wants smooches. Yes, she always wants smooches, and she always wants treats. Those are, yes, indeed, I'm talking about you. Yes, I'm talking about you. And Bird says, all the people who believe they are God are wrong. I would know. Yeah, well, because you suffer from that delusion yourself. Indy says, sure, any number of countries' leaderships can be a cult. North Korea, for example. Yeah. And North Korea is one, the big difference between Germany and North Korea is that Adolf was successful through charismatic leadership, and he was a successful leader. So, let's not, I know it's easy to only think about the, I don't want to say the bad versus the good, because he was 100% bad, but we only think about the failed plan to take over the world. We don't think about the fact that he managed to rally the people behind him. And, so, and it's easy for us to point the finger at him and say, well, look, he's obviously evil. Listen to his rhetoric. Well, if you try to objectively listen to the rhetoric of political leaders today, it's just as bad. They're just pointing the finger at a different group other than the Jews. So we need to be very, very careful about those kind of things. Now, difference with North Korea is that the Kim family has forced their cult-like system on the people. Now, it doesn't make it any less of a terrible situation, but it's very because most cults that are successful at one level or another, the people join voluntarily, and that's what we usually see. Let's see. Richie saying Kapla. Every cult leader ever, all the single ladies, all the single ladies. Well, not as that's that. Well, that is common in particularly modern American cults. It's not 100%. It's not always about sex or whatever, but for whatever reason, it frequently is. Yes, I'm talking. Yes, I'm talking. But yeah, that's and so, but as a Christian or specifically, the best way to avoid falling for a cult-like mentality is to keep exploring the truth. And that's true of anything. The best way to avoid a lie is to know what the truth is. And so, if you understand, to put it into something completely different, if you understand general relativity, Newtonian physics, and quantum mechanics, then somebody tries to BS their way through some physics thing, they're BSing you because you know the truth, right? And so, and especially like with cults that try to claim that, like a common theme that you see in some of these cults is that this person is Jesus resurrected kind of thing. If somebody's saying something like that and you understand what it actually says in the Bible, they're full of crap. So if you and so the best way to know a lie is to know the truth. The problem with Jews and Muslims in the Middle East, I'm surprised Israel never voted for an Israeli version of Uncle Adolf. Sometimes I am too. With all the terrible, and the funny thing is, you do kind of frequently hear rhetoric similar to Uncle Adolf's coming from some of the countries surrounding Israel. But fortunately, Israel's not fallen for getting a zealous, militant, anti-Muslim leader, because if they did, that would be very disastrous for the entire region and potentially for the entire world. So hopefully that never comes down to Israel being directly threatened or Israel becoming an aggressor against its surrounding states. Because Israel does have a significant stockpile of nuclear weapons. And Stanley says, who doesn't? Who doesn't what? Who doesn't like my Black Panther mask that I printed? I think it looks pretty good. Yeah, so who doesn't what? And now everybody's getting quiet. I hate those lulls of quietness in the stream. And Stanley says relativity is easy. I think that relativity is easy to understand. As far as conceptually, I have no problem with relativity. In fact, I think that conceptually, relativity, Newtonian physics, and quantum mechanics are actually fairly easy to get. But the math, as far as I can see E equals MC squared on the board. That doesn't mean I can solve that. Like if somebody says, okay, how much is this going to be in energy? I'll be like, I don't know. There's the equation. Starting to look like Picard's trophy room. Oh, with the mass there. Eventually, once I get things cleaned up, I plan on putting a shelf with my 3D projects on it. Who's next on the wall? Good question, Stan. There's a couple of things I want to do. Well, I'm going to be taking a little break from the 3D printing while I'm tuning the printer and stuff over the next couple of weeks. in my spare time. But once I get the room set up, I'll have a display case or something. But as far as my next big project, I'm thinking that either Ant-Man, because of the upcoming movie, and just to build a 3D model from scratch of the Ant-Man helmet, I think would be cool. Um, and the other one, the one that I really want to do is Doctor Doom. So let's see. Yeah, I stopped with algebra. Not even sure what calculus is. So, yeah, I went as far as geometry as far as in school. So, but yeah, you look at those equations and it hurts my brain. But I can talk to a physicist about what the actual real world consequences of relativity are all day long. And I get that. I just can't do the math. That's one of the reasons I love talking to people like Dr. Alex, who he has a PhD in cosmology. And so talking to him about this stuff and other people that actually are educated on it is always a lot of fun to me. Everything is relativity in West Virginia, especially in those mountains. I'm not sure I follow you there, Yuckster. When will Bird mount your severed head on his wall above the fireplace? Never. Never. Because Bird would have to, get to me first. And fortunately, the Kurdistani borders are quite secure. So it's not really anything that we worry about. Besides the fact that, Kuroga is kind of a joke. I mean, let's be real. Nobody actually takes him seriously as a threat. Sometimes we let them pretend that, the Kurogan military. But yeah. Let's see. What is it? What? Why are you you're just like going crazy today? Let's see. Latvian. Why do I call you Latvian? Yuckster says, here's a joke for you. How can you tell if you're a Jewish wedding in Utah when the groom and the bride are brother and sister? That doesn't even make sense to me. Sorry, that makes no sense unless you're trying to suggest that there's only like one family of Jews in Utah. But sorry, I don't get the humor there. You have a Jason on the wall, and you need to know it's Freddy Krueger's hand. That's not Jason, that's T'Challa. Jeez, some people, look. See, it's T'Challa, not Jason. Let's see. Any idea what religion Wakanda follows? Wasn't sure what funeral was based on. The funeral was, basically an amalgamation of various African traditions. I don't know that they've actually established what the Wakandans in the MCU believe. The only Christian in the MCU that I know of for sure was Captain America. But and then we have Miss Marvel. If you haven't seen that, she is a Muslim. And Thor, I guess you could say is a pagan because he's Thor. But outside of that, who knows? Alex says, my favorite part of the Bible, Jesus riding a cyborg fire-breathing T-Rex into battle against the army zombified Jewish werewolves. And where did they send the casket? Good question. I don't know. That it's like they loaded it on the ship and then put it somewhere. But yeah, don't know. Let's see. Now Alex says, you just know Christ had crazy mad kung fu skills. He was chopping Satan's brimstone into submission like nobody's business. Yeah, I don't remember there being any kung fu in the Gospels, but yeah. That's not how you fight Satan. You don't need to have mad kung fu skills, right? To pray. What are you doing? What are you doing? Huh? Okay, whatever. The Bible Vampire Hunter. Yeah, no vampires in the Bible that I'm aware of. Just FYI. Yeah, demons, sure. Vampires, not so much. You guys are nutty today. All right, I don't have much more time, so does anybody have anything serious they want to bring to the conversation? We got to go to church this morning. No, nobody has anything to say. Huh? No, nothing. Just drawing up a blank. I feel so bad. Delusional. Okay. And Bird says it's my birthday. Is it really, Bird? Well, happy birthday, buddy. I did not know that. I truly hope that your birthday is wonderful, and that you have a great day throughout. Salt Jagger, oh, Sensi Christ heard you, Salty Son. He's reading those barbed. No, Guy from the Red Bank says hi. How you doing? Haven't talked to you in a little bit. Hope you are well. And Bird says, have the women bathed and brought to me. Well, you do know that the women of Karoga are men, right? Well, of course, Bird knows that. Yeah. But yes, so happy birthday, Bird. I'd sing happy birthday, but I'm sure you wouldn't like that very much, so I'll refrain. Maybe I should sing happy birthday to you. Let's see. Indy says, I'm in pain, strained my hip muscle and tendon somehow, very painful. Ouch! Well, Indy, like the doctors say at our age, yeah, that'll happen. That's just, I know it sucks, but yeah, hopefully, where you live, there's not a huge prohibition on pain pills. But I would say relax, heat and ice, and I will tell you, ice does wonders. Put enough ice on there so that it's painful, and keep it there, and then take it off, put some heat on it, and go back and forth. It does help quite a bit with a strain. Let's see. In the Bible, Jesus said the next verse you follow is Gene Roddenberry. Yeah, right. And thank you, LDG, with the $2 super chat says, paying Salty Tractor to give Berta Prey happy birthday wishes. Well, I already gave him happy birthday wishes. You saying I should sing to him? Nah, I'd take more than $2 to get me to sing. But absolutely, happy birthday, Bird. And in all seriousness, I do hope that you have a great birthday. I didn't know today was your birthday, but I should have known since it's the 13th, and it would only make sense that you were born on Friday the 13th. It's not Friday the 13th today, but I'm sure you were born on a Friday the 13th. Actually, it'd be funny if you were. I don't know if you've checked it, but if you were born on a Friday, that'd be hilarious. Red Bank says, I'm busy with my new job doing a comic book project. Hey, no worries, man. I don't take roll call around here. It's always just good to see you. Let's face it, Jesus looked and sounded just like Mr. Miyagi. I don't think Jesus looked or sounded anything like Mr. Miyagi. And good morning to my wonderful friend whose name I can never pronounce. Alex says, happy birthday to Bird. And it says Monday the 13th, if I remember correctly. I'm pretty sure it was a Friday. And if it shows Monday, it's probably just because you skipped a couple of leap years. It's a Friday. It's got to be a Friday. And the doctor was wearing a hockey mask, cut the cord with a machete. I think that would make sense. What? All right. You going? Or are you staying? You don't know? Okay. You stay. But yeah, Bird, I am very, how old are you today? Like 300, 350? They say you're only as old as you feel, so I figured it probably has to be around there. 44? Wow, you don't look a day over 60. No, absolutely. Happy birthday. What was it like living next door to Christ, hearing Mary and Joseph argue over whose turn it is to milk the goat for cheese that evening? You know, I even had a nice intro to today's live stream. I'm trying to be chipper and happy and trying to be encouraging, trying to just be a good person. I guess shouldn't be. Oh, and is it Stan Lee? Is it your birthday too? Well, then happy birthday to you, Stan. I'm sorry that you were born on such a horrible day. That's this be the same day as the evil Emperor Bird of Prey 5, but okay. Oh, he says not today, just same age. Okay. Whew. Good then. Yeah, because obviously November 13th is not a good day to be born. That's when the 44 Club. Oh, is there a 44 Club? So that means I'm exactly 10 years older than you, Bird, now that you're 44. So, dodged a bullet there. You absolutely did, Stan. Yeah, I pray for those that were born on November 13th because, yes, they're just struggling. All right, let's see. Anything for real that you guys want to talk about, or are we going to wrap things up? Salty, if you were a cult leader, God forbid, but it somehow happened, would you dress up like Jim Jones? No. And Lore Reloaded, how you doing, buddy? Says, how is faith a delusion? Faith is a type of trust. Yes, that's exactly. I was talking about that about 45 minutes ago, Laura, and that's exactly right. But a lot of people don't understand the difference between trusting and a delusion, where a delusion is believing something that you have direct evidence to the contrary. Now, you can be a Christian or an atheist and not be delusional, but you can't, look at the sky and say it's red. Well, unless it's sunrise, I guess, and, not be delusional. Or look at grass and say that it's purple. It doesn't work that way. Facts are facts. And taking off, have a good one. Make it the best possible. Absolutely, especially to Bird of Prey 5, who is now 44 years young, as they like to say. I'm late to the party. That's okay, Laura. It's good to see you. I haven't talked to you in a little bit. Hope you are doing well. What's the specific aspects of making something a cult rather than just a club? That's a good question. And usually cults involve separating people from the rest of society and following the strict tenets of a central figure. And those are two big red flags about cults, is that they tend to cut off your relations with people outside of the cult. And they also tend to follow the strict teachings of whoever is in charge of the cult. And the slightest deviation is usually frowned upon extremely heavily. Do you think that it's because of those animals, the ark's interior stank something awful? More than likely, yes. And Bird says half the country is delusional over the 2020 election. I'd say more than half, Bird. But, and yeah, a lot more than half. Laura's saying, see ya. I don't know if you're taking off, Laura, if you were saying goodbye to the other person, but if you're taking off, have a good one, buddy. Guess all the cults have a religious component. No, not necessarily, but it's the funny thing. The reason you so frequently see religious cults is because people who are spiritually empty. And I don't necessarily mean atheists. I mean just people who are who don't have any strong sense of what they believe spiritually and all that, become very susceptible to a religious cult. And so, because then anything sounds good, because they're willing to tell you, oh, here's the truth, and not, you don't have to look for it. We'll tell you what it is, you know? And Youngster says Book of Revelation 1-3. Not sure what you're referring to specifically. Noah probably sawed his nose off after a certain point. You know, I wouldn't be surprised, because, whoo, man, that ark had to be ripe. But hey, he was doing God's work, and sometimes God's work don't smell that good. But the sky is red on the planet Mars. Actually, not true, Youngster. The sky is pink on Mars. Seen pictures. And funny enough, I was actually watching a show about that last night. Oh, they do sell sanctuary. You talking about churches? I don't think they sell. No church that I know sells sanctuary. You know, so I would dare say that's, yeah. And Richie says it's more like 35%. You're talking about. We're not going to get into the 2020 election, because I know there are people with strong feelings on both sides of that one, and I'm not going to get into that. Sometimes his work is cleaning up the crap. Yep. And sometimes that's what God calls you to do. Cult song. Guy from Red said, I'm just taking a break and drowning Kevin Smith. And drawing Kevin Smith. Okay, well, you go ahead and draw him. Hope it's a good drawing. Not a Kevin Smith fan myself, but no, you know. I guess I was just kind of, I never really cared about Kevin Smith, and then he did that He-Man thing, and I was like, really? Okay, whatever. The Ark had to have something akin to a sewage system expelling all that collective human animal waste into the ocean. I'm sure it did. Well, and if you look at the way that most things were done back then, is you would basically, and I'm sure that this is something Noah spent all of his time doing, he and his kids, would be to be shoveling it up into, buckets or whatever, and then dumping it over the side. The other thing about it is that, and I think it's interesting. Like, even though I'm not one that argues for Bible, but for a literal interpretation of Genesis, if you were to look at Noah's Ark and try to imagine it, how it could actually work, one thing that nobody seems to take into account is the fact that many of the creatures would not have required any kind of maintenance at all, because, for example, what if all the birds that he had on the ark were in eggs? Well, then you just got to put all the eggs together and keep them warm, and then they can hatch after the storm is over. Same with, reptiles. They could be in egg form too. Many of the larger creatures could have been infants. And so, because so when people say, "Oh, all those animals couldn't have possibly fit on the ark," well, like, depending on how you did it, I think it might be possible. And you also have to understand that not necessarily, like, we think of like dogs, right? He didn't have to have seven of every breed of dog. Right? All you had to do was bring some wolves with them, so maybe some foxes. And so that, because they're like the parental species of all modern canines. So, it's a little simpler than most people make it out to be. However, again, I don't argue for a literal interpretation of Genesis. I personally don't care if you believe in a literal interpretation or any other interpretation of Genesis, because I don't think that's the point of Genesis. Let's see. Can we talk about the 1920 elections instead of the 2020 elections? Well, sure, if you want. I don't even know who was running in 1920. I don't remember. I wasn't around back then. Could have just stored embryos. Well, that would be if the ark were made today, that would actually make a certain amount of sense. But yeah. Um, but yeah, so but I think infants, eggs, that kind of thing would save a lot of space. Not to mention the fact that not every variant of every species necessarily needed to be there. Maybe know how to transport and stored all those animals in the transporter buffer during the duration. Well, you see, that would make sense if we were talking about Star Trek, I suppose. But we're not talking about Star Trek here. Pretty sure the ark was pulled by a sleigh team. No, I'm pretty sure that wasn't the case. So Indy says, what is the point of Genesis? Good question, Indy. The point of Genesis is to explore the relationship of the world, earth, man, and God. To understand man's place over the earth and God's place over man. And instead, we try to argue over the historical accuracy of Genesis. It also, and I think that when people start to focus in on whether or not the world was literally created in 6 days, or whether those 6 days were 6 extended time periods, as many Christians believe, so that basically you could say that the science and scripture are both accurate. If you want to argue over whether or not the flood meant literally the entire globe, or when it said the world, did it simply mean the world as it was known then, which means basically the region we call the Middle East. There are a million different interpretations of the historicity of Genesis, to which I say none of them actually matter, because the lessons we take from the stories of Genesis are true regardless of whether or not Adam and Eve were 2 literal people created by God working in a garden, or Adam and Eve were a metaphor for human evolution. Either way, the lessons we take from the story of Adam and Eve are true. So I tend to not argue over whether or not Genesis, whether or not the Garden of Eden actually happened, or whether or not Adam and Eve were 2 literal people and all that. I have my personal beliefs on it, but that's not something that I think is worth fighting over. And honestly, any Christian that wants to fight hard over that, like you have Christians that have whole organizations like Answers in Genesis and stuff, where they try to argue, like they have this whole complicated model of how Genesis is literally true and all this stuff. It's not, it's an argument that, if anything, makes people less likely to be Christians, because anybody who needs to be convinced of this is probably looking at you like you're crazy because you deny science or something. And then you have other forms of argumentation like flat earth that I think are downright destructive. And I apologize if Darren's out there right now, but I genuinely believe the flat earth argumentation is dangerous. It pushes people even further away from Christianity. But not only that, it's, it's demonstrably false. And it's just one of those things that I don't know why people argue over it to this day. The only thing you show, that is delusional, in my opinion, to believe in a flat earth. Because that you do have evidence to the contrary. Anyway, and don't have any word about anything that can swim, and don't have to worry about anything that can swim. That's true too. Do you believe that the ark was real? Well, do I believe that the story of Noah was real, that he was called by God to create an ark and all that? I tend to lean towards yes, but I also tend to lean towards it doesn't matter. And so I don't spend a lot of time thinking about that. I tend to be one of those people that believe that if you look at Genesis, while it was written in a poetic form, and so that means you could take a lot of license with how how what the literal historical facts are versus what is written in the poem that is Genesis. I think that, for example, the creation week is not meant to say this is, it started on Monday or Sunday and ended on, Friday, as much as it's about the process that God used to create the universe as we know it. And that, whether, people want to argue, well, wait a minute, it said there was morning and there was evening the first day. And then other people will counter with the fact that it says that time to God is different than time to us. So a day to God could mean a huge period of time. Then people will argue about whether or not everything was made in the same order as evolutionary theory, and and that kind of stuff. I'm sorry, it's pointless argumentation on both sides. If could God have created the world in 6 days exactly how Genesis depicts it? Sure, it's a possibility. However, the current evidence doesn't support it as far as what we can see. How and the stupid thing about it, when people want to fight over it, is there's nothing about the book of Genesis that where it's not written in a historical text format. If you look at other books of the Bible that are clearly written in a historical format, they don't match Genesis. So I think we need to be very, very careful about what we're fighting over. And that's why I don't bother. It's not a fight I want to have. It says to be a memorable album. Not sure what that's about. Maybe Noah looked like William Shatner. I don't know what he looked like. No, Noah looked and sounded like Paul Cerrone from Anaconda Voice, just like the TV movie. Okay, if you say so. Are flat earthers a cult? No. I do think flat earthers are somewhat delusional, but I do not think they are a cult. To be a cult would mean they were all, because the flat earthers can't even agree on how the earth is flat. So there's 17,000 different models of the flat earth trying to get over some of the inherent problems with believing in a flat earth. But hey, if you want, if you want to believe that the earth is flat, well, I think that's a delusion. You go right ahead and believe it, but you start arguing for it, and I think that that's dangerous. Andy Tiger, the purpose of Genesis is to transfer uninhabitable planets into Class M worlds. Well, Earth has been spinning slightly slower or faster recently. Well, it can't be both. Or is it speeding up and slowing down? You got me confused. Bird of Prey 5, become a flat earther the other day following the Powerball delay. Oh, Bird of Prey became a flat earther the other day following the Powerball delay. Yeah, that was, don't get me started about that. I don't believe God would break physics to create physics, but that's my loco view. I actually tend to agree with you, LD. I think God is a logical God. And so I think that when we look at the Bible, the problem is that we're looking at the Bible as something that it isn't when we try to argue over the historicity of books like Genesis. The Bible is not meant to be taken as a science textbook. It's meant to be taken as a philosophy and theology book. But, and yes, there's history in it. But the point of the historical accounts is not to teach history like we do in schools, as much as to show you where the mistakes of man have been, or the relationship between man and God, and those are very different purposes. And then Alex saying angels are changelings. And sorry, you're so old. You to help no one, jerk. And then LD says faster, not sure why. I don't know. Good question. I would think faster. I would think faster thanks to the moon. Huh? And then he says, what? Solitary, I've just spoken with God. He said your place in heaven is secure, provided you cosplay as Paul Cerrone from Anaconda. I'll keep that in mind. If God wants me to cosplay as anything, I will do it. All he has to do is let me know. And he says, sorry, I think I heard that wrong. Okay, not sure. What did you hear wrong? All right, we got 3 minutes left. Any other questions before I wrap up? 3-minute warning. We'll see if anybody has anything else. Hopefully not silly. Oh, the spinning Earth question. Well, yeah. So someone said the Earth was spinning faster and slower. So I was confused by that because I haven't been tracking the speed of the Earth's rotation. So maybe it speeds up and then slows down or whatever. But I didn't think it could be both. Or are you asking if it is spinning faster or slower? In which case, I'd say ask an astronomer. And Indy Tiger says bye to everybody. Have a good one, Indy Tiger. And let's see. He was asking if it's spinning faster or slower. Yeah, I don't know. I was just meaning there have been reports that the Earth rotation has fluctuated recently. Couldn't remember if it was faster or slower. Gotcha. I have no idea. All right, I have to go to work soon. Take care and God bless. Same to you, guy from Red Bank. Take care. God bless. Have a good one. So days could have been longer during creation. Oh, yeah. That's I understand. Yeah, the rotation of the Earth could have been different. God's perspective on time is different. There are a million reasons why you could argue that's not a literal week. And the point is, none of those arguments are really important because it doesn't matter if it was a literal week. And who would win in a shirtless knife fight, me or Noah? Alex, for real? Please. Noah's a punk. Just no. I appreciate you, Alex, but man, you're a weirdo sometimes. All right, so with that, I think we're going to wrap things up. Thank you, Alex, for being you. But remember, as always, and I don't even know what's today's Sunday. Yeah, I'm not sure if I'll be able to do anything later today or not, but if so, we'll talk later. If not, we'll talk tomorrow night. And I hope everybody does well. I'm very much looking forward to the months ahead where we move to the new channel and stuff. Have some interesting plans there that some of you will love and some of you will hate. And we'll see about that. Anyway, with all that, remember, you're the salt of the earth. I'm the salty trekker. Yuckster is just, Yuckster and Alex are insane. That's my, yeah. All right. So take care. God bless. And yeah. What? I have a land bat sitting on my chair with me, staring at me with this really intense look.